I'm sitting here today, 2 years later, finally ready to tell you about the birthday that changed everything. My name is Sarah. I'm 27 now, and I want to share with you the story of how my 18th birthday became the catalyst that exposed 20 years of family dysfunction and ultimately led to my freedom. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever questioned whether the differential treatment you experienced was real or just in your head, this story is for you. The tale I'm about to tell involves a $15,000 Sweet 16 party, a completely forgotten 18th birthday, and the devastating moment when I realized that the family I'd been desperately trying to earn love from had never actually seen me as worthy of that love at all. But it's also a story of vindication, of boundary setting, and of discovering that sometimes the family you choose is far more valuable than the one you were born into. Let me take you back to the beginning, because understanding my family's dynamics is crucial to understanding why that birthday hurt so deeply. I was the eldest of two daughters, born to parents who had what I now recognize as a very transactional approach to love. My mother, Patricia, was the type of woman who measured worth through appearances and achievements that reflected well on her. My father, Robert, was more passive but equally invested in maintaining what he called the family image. My sister Emma came along when I was 3, and from the moment she arrived, the household energy shifted in ways I was too young to understand, but old enough to feel. Emma was what therapists now call the golden child. Everything she did was celebrated, every milestone was monumental, every achievement was a family triumph. I became what's known as the invisible child, the one whose role was to be responsible, self-sufficient, and never require too much attention or resources. Growing up, I told myself this was normal. I convinced myself that parents naturally had different relationships with different children, and that my role was to be the mature, reliable one, while Emma got to be the cherished, celebrated one. I became an expert at minimizing my own needs and maximizing my usefulness to the family unit. The pattern started early and was consistent. When Emma lost her first tooth at 5, my mother organized an elaborate tooth fairy celebration, complete with glittery notes and a special breakfast. When I lost my first tooth at 6, I got a quarter under my pillow and was told not to wake anyone up if I found it during the night. When Emma started kindergarten, my mother took the entire day off work to volunteer in her classroom and document every moment. When I started first grade, I walked myself to school because my mother was busy helping Emma adjust to her new preschool schedule. Academic achievements followed the same pattern. Emma's A's were refrigerator-worthy and came with special dinners at her favorite restaurant. My A's were expected and acknowledged with a brief nod and comment about how I should keep it up. When Emma struggled with math in elementary school, my parents hired a tutor and spent hours each night helping her practice. When I struggled with advanced chemistry in high school, I was told that I needed to figure it out myself because that's what mature students do. The financial disparities were stark, but always justified with elaborate explanations that made me feel guilty for even noticing. Emma's clothing came from department stores while mine came from discount retailers, but this was explained as me being practical and low maintenance. Emma got private music lessons for 3 different instruments over the years, while I was told that school band was sufficient for my needs. Emma attended expensive summer camps while I spent summers babysitting neighborhood children to earn my own spending money. But perhaps the most painful pattern was how my emotional needs were handled versus hers. When Emma was upset, the entire family rallied to comfort her, analyze what had happened, and ensure she felt supported. When I was struggling with typical teenage challenges like friendship drama or academic pressure, I was reminded that I was the strong one, the one who could handle things, and that I shouldn't burden the family with problems I was capable of solving myself. I learned to internalize this messaging so thoroughly that I genuinely believed I was the lucky one for being so independent and resilient. I told myself I was grateful not to be the spoiled, high-maintenance daughter who needed constant attention. I prided myself on being self-sufficient and not causing problems for my parents. Looking back, I can see how expertly I was trained to gaslight myself into accepting emotional neglect as a character strength. The year I turned 17, the anticipation for Emma's upcoming Sweet 16 began consuming our household. My mother started planning the party a full year in advance, consulting with event planners, researching venues, and creating elaborate Pinterest boards. The excitement was infectious, and I found myself genuinely happy for Emma and curious about what my own 18th birthday celebration might look like. I had always assumed that 18th birthdays were bigger deals than 16th birthdays. After all, 18 meant legal adulthood, voting rights, and the transition to college. I imagined that if Emma's 16th was going to be spectacular, my 18th would be even more meaningful, even if it might be different in style since I was more low-key than Emma. The planning for Emma's party became a family obsession. Every dinner conversation revolved around vendor selections, color schemes, and guest lists. My mother took Emma shopping for the perfect dress, spending an entire Saturday visiting boutiques and trying on dozens of options before finding the perfect pink creation that cost more than my entire wardrobe. They selected a country club venue, hired a professional DJ, arranged for a candy bar, a photo booth, and custom decorations that transformed the space into what looked like a fairy tale ballroom. The guest list included everyone Emma had ever been friendly with, plus family members from across the country who flew in specifically for the celebration. My mother hired a professional photographer to document every moment, from the getting ready process to the final dance. The invitations were custom designed and hand-delivered to ensure they felt special and exclusive. The party itself was indeed spectacular. Emma looked radiant in her pink gown, surrounded by friends and family who celebrated her transition into young adulthood with genuine joy and enthusiasm. The decorations were magazine-worthy, the food was abundant and beautifully presented, and the entertainment kept everyone engaged throughout the evening. My mother glowed with pride as guests complimented her on the beautiful celebration she had orchestrated. I helped with setup and cleanup, took photos when the professional photographer was busy, and generally made myself useful throughout the event. Multiple guests commented to me about what a wonderful celebration it was and how lucky Emma was to have such thoughtful parents. I agreed wholeheartedly and felt genuinely proud of my family for creating such a memorable experience for Emma. The final cost of the celebration came to just over $15,000, a fact my mother shared with several relatives while expressing how worth it the expense had been to see Emma so happy. This seemed reasonable to me at the time. After all, it was a once-in-a-lifetime celebration for an important milestone, and our family was financially comfortable enough to afford such luxuries. As my 18th birthday approached 6 months later, I began dropping subtle hints about my own celebration preferences. I mentioned how much I had enjoyed Emma's party and how thoughtful all the details had been. I commented on 18th birthday celebrations I had attended for friends, noting which elements I found particularly meaningful. I offered to help with planning and suggested we might start thinking about guest lists or venue options. These hints were met with vague acknowledgments and promises that we would discuss my birthday closer to the date. My mother assured me that 18 was indeed a special milestone and that we would absolutely celebrate appropriately. I interpreted this to mean that planning would begin soon, just as it had for Emma's celebration. 2 months before my birthday, I directly asked my mother about our plans. She seemed surprised by the question and told me she had been thinking about it but wasn't sure what I wanted. This puzzled me because she had never asked Emma what she wanted. The planning had simply begun with assumptions about creating something spectacular. When I suggested we could use the same venue or even just have a smaller version of Emma's celebration, my mother said she would think about it and get back to me. 1 month before my birthday, I asked again. This time, my mother seemed almost irritated by the question, telling me that my birthday fell during a particularly busy time at her work and that we might need to keep things simple this year. She suggested maybe a nice dinner at a restaurant with just the immediate family. The contrast to Emma's year-long planning process was jarring, but I told myself that different didn't necessarily mean less meaningful. 2 weeks before my birthday, I tried a different approach. I offered to take on the planning responsibilities myself, asking only for a budget and guest list approval. I suggested several options ranging from a simple backyard gathering to a modest restaurant celebration. My mother told me she appreciated my initiative, but that she didn't think a big party was really my style anyway, and that she was sure I would prefer something more low-key and intimate. 1 week before my birthday, I realized with growing panic that nothing had been planned at all. No venue had been booked, no invitations had been sent, no family members had been contacted, and no preparations of any kind had been made. When I brought this up to my mother, she seemed genuinely surprised that I was upset, reminding me that I had always been the practical, low-maintenance daughter who didn't need elaborate celebrations to feel loved. The day before my birthday, I asked my mother directly what our plans were for the following day. She told me she had made a reservation at a local restaurant for the four of us to have dinner together. When I asked about other family members or friends, she explained that she hadn't thought to invite anyone else because 18th birthdays weren't really the kind of milestone that required extended celebration, unlike sweet 16s, which were traditionally bigger affairs. My 18th birthday arrived on a Tuesday in March. I woke up that morning with a mixture of anticipation and dread, still holding on to hope that perhaps my family had planned some kind of surprise or had been downplaying their preparations to make the actual celebration more meaningful. I came downstairs expecting to find some acknowledgement of the day, decorations, special breakfast, or at minimum enthusiastic birthday wishes from my family. Instead, I found a normal Tuesday morning. My father was reading the newspaper while eating cereal, my mother was checking emails on her phone, and Emma was complaining about an upcoming algebra test. No one looked up when I entered the kitchen. No one said happy birthday. There were no decorations, no special breakfast, no gifts waiting on the counter. I stood there for several minutes, waiting for someone to notice me or acknowledge the significance of the day. Finally, I cleared my throat and mentioned that it was my birthday. My mother looked up from her phone with mild surprise, as if she had genuinely forgotten, and said happy birthday in the same tone she might use to comment on the weather. My father echoed the sentiment without looking up from his newspaper. Emma mumbled a distracted happy birthday while continuing to study her algebra notes. That was it. That was the entirety of my 18th birthday morning acknowledgement. No hugs, no excitement, no special plans mentioned, no gifts presented. Just 3 distracted family members who seemed mildly inconvenienced by the reminder that this day was supposed to be significant. I went to school that day feeling hollow and confused. Friends wished me happy birthday throughout the day, several teachers acknowledged the milestone, and I received cards and small gifts from classmates who remembered. The contrast between how my birthday was received at school versus at home was stark and painful. Outside my family, my 18th birthday was recognized as the significant milestone it was supposed to be. Within my family, it was treated as an ordinary Tuesday that happened to fall on the date I was born. That evening, we went to the local restaurant as planned. It was a casual chain restaurant, the kind of place we might go for any ordinary family dinner. No one else was invited. There were no decorations, no special requests to the staff, no acknowledgement from the restaurant that we were celebrating anything special. We ordered from the regular menu, made small talk about mundane topics, and finished our meal within an hour. The only indication that this dinner was supposed to be a birthday celebration was when the server brought out a small slice of complimentary cake with a single candle. Even this gesture came only because my mother had mentioned to the server that it was my birthday when we were seated. The server sang a brief happy birthday song, I blew out the candle, and we finished our cake in relative silence. No gifts were exchanged, no speeches were made, no photos were taken. No extended family members called to offer birthday wishes because none of them had been informed about my birthday in advance. The entire celebration lasted exactly as long as a regular family dinner and felt no different from any other random Tuesday evening meal. As we drove home that night, I sat in the backseat of our car feeling a profound sense of disconnection from my own life. I couldn't understand how the same parents who had spent $15,000 and a year of planning to celebrate Emma turning 16 had marked my transition to legal adulthood with a $30 dinner at a chain restaurant and a slice of complimentary cake. The logical part of my brain tried to rationalize the difference. Maybe 18 really wasn't as big a deal as 16. Maybe I really was more low maintenance and didn't need elaborate celebrations. Maybe the timing really had been inconvenient and a bigger celebration would happen later. Maybe my parents were saving money for my college expenses instead of spending it on parties. But the emotional part of my brain knew that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. The same family that had hired professional photographers, rented country club venues, and flown in relatives from across the country to celebrate Emma's 16th birthday had forgotten my 18th birthday entirely until I reminded them on the actual day. The same parents who had spent months planning every detail of Emma's celebration had made a single restaurant reservation for my milestone birthday. That night, lying in my bed, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I decided to start paying attention to the patterns I had been trained to ignore. I decided to document the differential treatment I had been taught to minimize. I decided to trust my own perceptions instead of constantly gaslighting myself into accepting less than I deserved. I started keeping a notebook where I recorded instances of differential treatment between Emma and me. I wrote down conversations, financial disparities, time investments, and emotional responses. I began to see our family dynamics with new clarity, recognizing patterns that had been consistent throughout my entire childhood, but that I had been trained to rationalize away. The notebook filled quickly. I documented how Emma's college application process was treated as a family project, while mine was considered my personal responsibility. I recorded how Emma's prom dress shopping involved my mother taking a day off work to visit multiple stores, while my prom dress was purchased during a quick trip to a single discount retailer. I noted how Emma's senior year activities were celebrated and documented, while mine were acknowledged with brief comments and no photographic record. But the most painful entries in my notebook were about emotional support and validation. I wrote about how Emma's teenage drama was met with family meetings and supportive conversations, while my struggles were dismissed as character-building challenges I needed to handle independently. I documented how Emma's achievements were celebrated with elaborate family announcements, while mine were acknowledged with brief compliments and immediate redirections to areas where I could improve. As I continued documenting these patterns, I began to understand that my 18th birthday wasn't an anomaly or a scheduling mistake. It was simply the most obvious manifestation of a dynamic that had been consistent throughout my entire childhood. I had never been the daughter who deserved celebration, investment, or elaborate demonstrations of love. I had always been the daughter who was expected to be grateful for the basics and not require special treatment to feel valued. This realization was devastating but also liberating. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. I stopped making excuses for treatment that was fundamentally unfair. I stopped believing that my needs were inherently less important than Emma's needs. 6 months after my forgotten birthday, I made another life-changing decision. I applied for colleges that were far from home, focusing on schools that offered substantial merit-based scholarships so I could minimize my financial dependence on my parents. I stopped participating in family activities that consistently excluded or minimized me. I began spending more time with friends and mentors who actually valued my presence and contributions. My parents initially didn't notice these changes because they had never paid close attention to my choices or preferences anyway. When they eventually realized I was pulling away from family activities, they seemed more annoyed than concerned, treating my boundaries as rebellious behavior rather than healthy self-protection. The real confrontation came during my senior year when college acceptance letters started arriving. I had been accepted to several prestigious universities with significant scholarship offers, achievements that represented years of hard work and academic excellence. When I shared this news with my family, their responses were lukewarm and immediately followed by concerns about how I would manage the remaining expenses without burdening them financially. Emma, meanwhile, had been accepted to expensive private schools with minimal scholarship support, and my parents immediately began discussing how they would finance her education through loans, savings, and family contributions. The contrast was stunning. My academic achievements that would minimize family expenses were met with lukewarm congratulations, while Emma's acceptances that would require maximum family financial investment were celebrated as family victories. That's when I realized that my notebook documenting years of differential treatment wasn't just a therapeutic exercise. It was evidence of systematic favoritism that had shaped every major decision in our household since Emma was born. I had the receipts, literally and figuratively, of 20 years of being treated as the less important daughter. I decided to present this evidence to my parents in a calm, organized conversation. I asked for a family meeting, stating that I wanted to discuss some concerns about our family dynamics before I left for college. My parents agreed, probably expecting me to ask for money or express anxiety about leaving home. Instead, I presented my notebook. I showed them documented examples of differential treatment spanning my entire childhood. I explained how the pattern of Emma receiving elaborate celebrations while I received basic acknowledgments had culminated in my forgotten 18th birthday. I described how this treatment had affected my self-worth and my ability to trust my own perceptions. My parents' initial reaction was defensive denial. They insisted that they had always treated both daughters fairly, just differently according to our individual personalities and needs. They claimed that I was being overly sensitive and reading malicious intent into innocent parenting choices. They suggested that my documentation of these incidents showed an unhealthy obsession with keeping score instead of focusing on gratitude for everything they had provided. But as I continued presenting specific examples with dates, costs, and clear contrasts, their defensive explanations began to sound increasingly hollow. When I showed them the financial breakdown of Emma's Sweet 16 celebration compared to my 18th birthday dinner, they couldn't explain the disparity in any way that didn't acknowledge fundamental unfairness. The most damaging moment came when my mother, clearly frustrated with my systematic presentation of evidence, finally snapped and said what she had apparently been thinking for years. She told me that Emma had always been the special one, the daughter who brought joy and light to the family, while I had always been the responsible one who didn't need constant attention and validation to thrive. She said that some children are born to be celebrated while others are born to be supportive, and that both roles were equally important to family functioning. This statement was a revelation, not because it told me anything I didn't already know, but because it was the first time my mother had acknowledged the differential treatment without trying to justify it as being in my best interest. She had admitted that they had consciously chosen to invest their emotional and financial resources primarily in Emma, while expecting me to be content with the leftovers. My father's response was equally illuminating. Instead of disagreeing with my mother's characterization, he simply said that I should be grateful for the independence and resilience I had developed as a result of their parenting choices. He suggested that Emma was actually the disadvantaged one because she had been protected from the character-building challenges that had made me so capable and self-sufficient. In that moment, I understood that my parents genuinely believed they had done nothing wrong. They had created a family system where one daughter was cherished and celebrated, while the other was utilized and expected to be grateful for the privilege of being useful. They saw this dynamic as natural and beneficial rather than fundamentally unfair and emotionally damaging. I thanked them for their honesty and told them that their explanation had clarified everything I needed to know about our family dynamics. I explained that I would be attending college far from home and that I would be reassessing our relationship based on this new understanding of how they viewed my role in the family. My departure for college that fall was met with minimal emotion from my parents. They helped me move into my dorm room, took a few obligatory photos, and drove home the same day. The contrast to Emma's eventual college send-off was predictable but still painful. When Emma left for college 2 years later, my parents took a week-long vacation to help her settle in, decorated her dorm room, and threw a goodbye party for her friends and family. But by then, I had built a new life that didn't depend on their validation or investment. I had found mentors, friends, and eventually a chosen family who valued me for who I was, rather than tolerating me for what I could do for them. I had discovered that the independence they had forced on me had indeed made me resilient, but not in the way they intended. It had made me resilient enough to recognize that I deserved better treatment and capable enough to create that better treatment for myself. College became my sanctuary and my launching pad. I threw myself into academics, leadership opportunities, and meaningful relationships with people who actually wanted me around. I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in psychology, partly because I wanted to understand the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood, and partly because I wanted to help other people who had experienced similar emotional neglect. My academic success opened doors to graduate school opportunities and eventually to a fulfilling career as a family therapist, specializing in sibling dynamics and parental favoritism. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' emotional neglect had inadvertently prepared me to help other families avoid the same destructive patterns. Throughout my college and graduate school years, my relationship with my family remained cordial but distant. I came home for major holidays but didn't participate in the elaborate celebrations that continued to center around Emma's milestones. I sent gifts and cards for birthdays and anniversaries, but didn't expect or receive the same thoughtfulness in return. The validation I had been seeking from my family finally came from an unexpected source. During my second year of graduate school, I was selected to present my research on sibling favoritism at a national psychology conference. My presentation was well received, and several established researchers in the field approached me afterward to discuss collaboration opportunities. One of these researchers, Dr. Martinez, mentioned that she had read my undergraduate thesis on family systems and differential treatment patterns. She told me that my work was some of the most insightful analysis she had seen on the long-term effects of parental favoritism, particularly because it combined theoretical knowledge with clearly personal experience that had been processed through a therapeutic lens. Dr. Martinez invited me to co-author a paper with her on the psychological impacts of systematic sibling favoritism. Our research was eventually published in a prestigious family therapy journal and became frequently cited in the field. My name was now associated with groundbreaking research on the exact family dynamics that had defined my childhood. When the article was published, I sent a copy to my parents along with a note explaining that my childhood experiences had inspired my academic focus and eventual career path. I thanked them for providing me with first-hand knowledge of family dynamics that had contributed to research that was now helping other families avoid similar destructive patterns. Their response was minimal and deflective. My mother called to congratulate me on my academic achievement, but immediately shifted the conversation to Emma's recent promotion at work. My father sent a brief email saying he was proud of my success, but didn't acknowledge the content of the research or its connection to our family dynamics. But the real vindication came when other people began reading my work and sharing their own stories of sibling favoritism and parental neglect. I received emails from readers who said my research had helped them understand their own family experiences and given them language to describe treatment they had always known was unfair but hadn't been able to articulate. Some of these readers shared stories that were remarkably similar to mine: elaborate celebrations for golden children, while invisible children received basic acknowledgments, financial investments in favored siblings, while others were expected to be self-sufficient, emotional support for chosen children, while others were told to handle problems independently. Reading these stories confirmed what I had suspected throughout my research. My family's treatment of me wasn't unique or even particularly unusual. Parental favoritism is more common than most people want to acknowledge, and its effects on unfavored children are consistent and predictable across different families and circumstances. This realization was both comforting and infuriating. Comforting because it meant I wasn't alone in my experience, and that my perceptions of unfair treatment had been accurate. Infuriating because it meant that countless other children were growing up believing they were less worthy of love and investment than their siblings. I decided to expand my work beyond academic research into practical family intervention. I began offering workshops for parents on recognizing and addressing favoritism patterns in their families. I developed therapeutic protocols for helping unfavored children rebuild their self-worth and establish healthy boundaries with family members who had systematically devalued them. The workshops were consistently overbooked, with waiting lists months long. Parents would attend seeking help for what they described as sibling rivalry or family conflict, only to discover that they had been unconsciously perpetuating favoritism patterns that were damaging their children's emotional development. Some parents were genuinely shocked to recognize their own behavior in my presentations and committed to changing their family dynamics. Others became defensive and insisted that differential treatment was justified by their children's different personalities and needs. The most resistant parents sounded exactly like my own parents, convinced that their favoritism was actually beneficial for all their children. But the most meaningful part of my work became the individual therapy I provided to adults who had grown up as unfavored children. These clients came to me carrying the same confusion, self-doubt, and desperate need for validation that I had experienced throughout my childhood. They had internalized messages about being less worthy, less important, and less deserving of love and attention. Working with these clients was both healing and triggering. Their stories reflected my own experience with painful accuracy, and their progress toward self-worth and boundary setting mirrored my own journey away from family of origin dysfunction. Through helping them heal, I continued healing myself. One of my clients, Maria, had grown up in a family where her younger brother received elaborate birthday celebrations, expensive gifts, and constant attention, while she was expected to be the responsible, self-sufficient daughter who didn't require special treatment. Her brother's high school graduation was celebrated with a large party and expensive gifts, while her college graduation was acknowledged with a brief congratulations and no celebration. When Maria described her family dynamics, I felt like I was looking in a mirror. Her experiences were so similar to mine that I sometimes had to pause during our sessions to separate her story from my own memories. But watching Maria develop the strength to confront her family's favoritism and establish healthy boundaries reminded me of how far I had come in my own healing journey. Maria eventually confronted her parents about their differential treatment, presenting them with specific examples of favoritism spanning her entire childhood. Like my parents, hers initially responded with defensive denial, followed by justifications about her independence and resilience. But unlike my parents, Maria's parents eventually acknowledged the unfairness of their treatment and committed to changing their behavior. This acknowledgement didn't undo the damage that had been done to Maria's self-worth, but it did provide the validation she needed to fully trust her own perceptions and move forward with confidence in her decision to maintain boundaries until her parents demonstrated lasting change in their behavior. Watching Maria's family make genuine progress toward more equitable treatment gave me hope that healing was possible even in families with long-established favoritism patterns. It also highlighted how my own parents' continued denial and deflection represented a choice rather than an inevitable outcome. As my career continued to develop, I found myself becoming a recognized expert in the field of family favoritism and its long-term psychological effects. I was invited to speak at conferences, consulted on research projects, and frequently quoted in articles about sibling dynamics and parental differential treatment. This professional recognition provided the external validation I had never received from my family of origin. Universities, colleagues, and clients valued my insights and expertise in ways my parents never had. The independence and resilience my parents had claimed to value were finally being appreciated, but by people who also recognized that these qualities had been developed through unnecessary emotional hardship. 5 years after my forgotten 18th birthday, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother. Emma was getting married, and my parents were planning an elaborate wedding celebration. My mother wanted to know if I would be willing to help with wedding planning and contribute financially to the event. The request was stunning in its audacity and predictability. After years of minimal contact and continued dismissive treatment, my parents were now asking me to invest my time, energy, and money into celebrating Emma's next major milestone. They had somehow convinced themselves that I would be eager to participate in planning another elaborate celebration for the daughter who had always been the family priority. I thanked my mother for thinking of me and told her that I would need some time to consider my level of involvement in Emma's wedding planning. I explained that my participation would depend on whether our family dynamics had evolved to include more equitable treatment of both daughters. My mother seemed surprised by my response, apparently having expected automatic agreement to help with wedding preparations. She asked what I meant by equitable treatment, as if the years of documented favoritism had somehow been erased from family history. I reminded her of our conversation before I left for college, when she had acknowledged that Emma was the special daughter who brought joy to the family, while I was the responsible daughter who supported family functioning. I explained that I would be happy to participate in wedding planning if my contributions would be valued equally to Emma's preferences, and if my relationship with the family would be treated as equally important to Emma's relationship with the family. This conversation led to a series of family discussions that were both painful and illuminating. My parents insisted that they had always treated both daughters fairly, and that any differential treatment had been appropriate responses to our different personalities and needs. They claimed not to remember the conversation where my mother had explicitly acknowledged their favoritism. Emma, for her part, seemed genuinely surprised to learn about my experiences growing up. She had been so immersed in her role as the favored daughter that she had never questioned why my milestones were celebrated differently than hers, or why my achievements received less family attention than her own. Emma's surprise revealed how effectively family favoritism can blind both the favored and unfavored children to the reality of differential treatment. She had grown up believing that her elaborate celebrations and constant attention were normal parts of family life, never questioning why I received different treatment or considering how that treatment might affect my relationship with the family. During these discussions, I presented the same evidence I had compiled years earlier, updated with additional examples from college and graduate school years. I showed my family the patterns of differential treatment that had persisted even after I had moved away and established my independence. The most striking example was my graduate school graduation, which had been acknowledged with a brief phone call, compared to Emma's bachelor's degree graduation, which had been celebrated with a family gathering, expensive gifts, and a weekend-long celebration. Both degrees represented significant achievements, but only Emma's had been treated as worthy of elaborate family celebration. My parents' response to this updated evidence was remarkably consistent with their previous reactions. They acknowledged the differential treatment but insisted it was justified by our different personalities and needs. They maintained that Emma required more celebration and attention while I thrived on independence and minimal fuss. This response confirmed that my parents had learned nothing from our previous conversations or from the years of minimal contact that had followed. They remained committed to a family narrative where favoritism was not only acceptable but beneficial for all involved. At that point, I made the decision that would define my relationship with my family going forward. I told my parents that I would attend Emma's wedding as a guest, but would not participate in planning or financing the celebration. I explained that I would continue to maintain cordial relationships with all family members, but would not invest significant time, energy, or resources in family dynamics that continued to devalue my worth and contributions. I also told Emma privately that I was happy for her engagement and wanted her to have a beautiful wedding, but that I could not participate in planning another elaborate family celebration, while my own milestones continued to receive minimal acknowledgement. I encouraged her to enjoy her special day and assured her that my boundaries were about family dynamics rather than personal feelings toward her. Emma's wedding was indeed elaborate and beautiful. My parents spared no expense in creating a memorable celebration that reflected Emma's personality and preferences. The cost of the wedding exceeded $30,000, funded through a combination of family savings and contributions from relatives who were eager to support Emma's happiness. I attended the wedding as promised, bringing an appropriate gift and participating in the celebration as a supportive family member. But I observed the event with the analytical eye of a family therapist who specialized in sibling favoritism dynamics. The contrast between Emma's wedding celebration and my forgotten 18th birthday crystallized everything I had learned about our family's priorities and values. After the wedding, my relationship with my family settled into a new equilibrium. I maintained contact through holiday cards, occasional phone calls, and brief visits during major family gatherings. But I no longer expected or sought the validation, support, or investment that I had spent my childhood desperately trying to earn. This emotional detachment was both liberating and sad. Liberating because I was finally free from the exhausting cycle of hoping for different treatment and being disappointed by consistent favoritism. Sad because it meant acknowledging that the family relationships I had wanted were never going to develop naturally and might never develop at all. But the space created by reducing my emotional investment in family dynamics allowed me to focus more fully on relationships and activities that actually nourished me. I deepened friendships with people who valued my presence and contributions. I continued advancing in my career, eventually establishing my own private practice, specializing in family therapy and sibling dynamics. Most importantly, I began developing the chosen family relationships that would provide the support, celebration, and validation I had never received from my family of origin. These relationships were based on mutual respect, reciprocal investment, and genuine appreciation for each person's unique qualities and contributions. My chosen family celebrated my achievements with enthusiasm and attention. When I defended my doctoral dissertation, they organized a celebration dinner and gave thoughtful gifts that reflected their understanding of how hard I had worked to reach that milestone. When I published my first book on family favoritism, they threw a launch party and proudly shared news of my success with their own networks. These celebrations felt different from anything I had experienced growing up. They were based on genuine excitement about my achievements rather than obligation to acknowledge family milestones. They reflected real understanding of what my accomplishments meant to me, rather than perfunctory recognition of events that were supposed to be important. The contrast highlighted how much emotional energy I had wasted trying to earn authentic celebration from people who were fundamentally incapable of providing it. My parents had demonstrated repeatedly that they were not willing or able to value my achievements in the same way they valued Emma's milestones. No amount of success, independence, or resilience on my part was going to change that fundamental dynamic. Understanding this reality was initially devastating but ultimately freeing. I could stop trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I was the supporting character rather than the main character in our family story. I could invest my energy in relationships where my worth was recognized and celebrated rather than minimized and dismissed. 7 years after my forgotten 18th birthday, I reached a milestone that surprised even me. My research on family favoritism had gained national attention, leading to invitations to speak at conferences across the country and opportunities to consult with family therapy programs at major universities. One of these opportunities led to a tenure-track position at a prestigious university where I would be teaching graduate courses in family systems therapy while continuing my research on sibling dynamics and parental favoritism. The position came with a significant salary increase, excellent benefits, and the kind of professional recognition I had dreamed of during my graduate school years. When I called to share this news with my family, their response was predictably lukewarm. My mother congratulated me briefly before shifting the conversation to Emma's recent promotion at her marketing firm. My father sent a brief email expressing pride in my achievement, but offering no specific comments about what the position meant for my career or future goals. The contrast was particularly stark because Emma's promotion, while certainly a nice achievement, was a routine advancement within her existing company rather than a significant career milestone. Yet it received more family attention and enthusiasm than my appointment to a position that represented the culmination of years of academic work and professional development. This response confirmed that my family's treatment patterns had not evolved despite years of evidence about their impact and consequences. My achievements would continue to receive minimal acknowledgement, while Emma's milestones would continue to be celebrated as family victories. But this time, their lukewarm response didn't devastate me the way similar dismissals had throughout my childhood and young adulthood. I had built a support network of colleagues, friends, and chosen family members who understood the significance of my professional success and celebrated it appropriately. My doctoral advisor organized a celebration dinner attended by faculty and fellow graduate students who had supported my work throughout my academic journey. Colleagues in my field sent congratulatory messages that reflected genuine understanding of what this career milestone represented. Friends threw a party to celebrate my success and express excitement about my future opportunities. These celebrations provided the validation and recognition I had always craved, but had never received from my family of origin. They demonstrated that my achievements were indeed worthy of celebration, and that my success reflected qualities and efforts that deserved acknowledgement and appreciation. The difference between my family's dismissive response and my chosen family's enthusiastic celebration crystallized something important about the nature of love and support. Real love celebrates the people we care about when they achieve things that matter to them. Real support recognizes when someone has worked hard and accomplished something significant. Real family relationships involve reciprocal investment in each other's happiness and success. My family of origin had never provided these things consistently, not because I was unworthy of them, but because they had established a dynamic where only Emma's happiness and success were prioritized. This dynamic was so entrenched that even evidence of its harmfulness hadn't motivated them to change their patterns. Understanding this reality allowed me to stop taking their dismissiveness personally. Their inability to celebrate my achievements reflected their limitations rather than my worthiness. Their continued favoritism represented their choice to maintain dysfunctional family dynamics rather than evidence that Emma was more deserving of love and attention. This shift in perspective was transformative. Instead of feeling hurt by their lukewarm responses, I began to feel sad for them. They were missing opportunities to connect with me, to understand my work, and to participate meaningfully in my life because they remained committed to patterns that prioritized one relationship over another. As my career continued to flourish, I found myself in a position to help other families avoid the destructive dynamics that had defined my childhood. My research was being cited in textbooks, my therapeutic protocols were being adopted by family therapy programs, and my speaking engagements were helping parents recognize and address favoritism patterns in their own families. This work felt like the ultimate vindication, not because it proved my worth to my family of origin, but because it transformed my painful experiences into resources that could help other people heal and grow. The emotional neglect I had experienced became the foundation for expertise that was making a real difference in other families' lives. I began receiving letters and emails from people who had read my work or attended my presentations. Many of these messages came from adults who had grown up as unfavored children and were struggling to heal from the long-term effects of parental favoritism. Others came from parents who had recognized favoritism patterns in their own families and were working to change their behavior. One letter particularly moved me. It came from a mother who had attended one of my workshops after recognizing that she was unconsciously favoring her younger daughter over her older son. She wrote about how my presentation had opened her eyes to patterns she had been perpetuating without awareness, and how she was now working to repair her relationship with her son while ensuring more equitable treatment of both children. This mother's letter represented exactly the kind of change I hoped my work would inspire. Unlike my own parents, she had been willing to acknowledge problematic patterns and commit to changing her behavior. Her children would grow up in a family where their worth was recognized and celebrated equally, something I had never experienced but was now helping other families achieve. Reading letters like hers reminded me that healing was possible, change was achievable, and the pain I had experienced could be transformed into something that helped prevent similar pain for other children. My forgotten 18th birthday had started a journey that led not only to my own healing, but to resources that were helping other families heal as well. 10 years after that forgotten birthday, I found myself preparing for a milestone celebration that would be entirely of my own choosing. I was turning 28 and had decided to throw myself the elaborate birthday party I had never received as a teenager. Not because I needed external validation anymore, but because I wanted to celebrate how far I had come and express gratitude to the people who had supported my journey. The party was everything my 18th birthday celebration should have been. I rented a beautiful venue, hired a photographer to document the evening, and invited everyone who had played meaningful roles in my personal and professional development. The guest list included chosen family members, colleagues, mentors, and friends who had supported me through various challenges and celebrated my achievements along the way. The decorations reflected my personality and interests rather than someone else's vision of what a celebration should look like. The food was chosen based on my preferences and dietary needs. The entertainment reflected activities I actually enjoyed rather than generic party elements. Most importantly, the entire evening was filled with people who genuinely wanted to be there, who valued my presence in their lives, and who were excited to celebrate my journey from emotional neglect to professional success and personal fulfillment. I invited my family to attend this celebration, not because I expected them to suddenly understand its significance, but because I wanted to give them an opportunity to participate in my life if they chose to do so. Their response was predictable. My parents declined to attend due to scheduling conflicts, and Emma sent a card but also didn't attend. Their absence didn't diminish the celebration in any way. If anything, it highlighted how much my happiness and self-worth had become independent of their validation and participation. I was surrounded by people who actually wanted to celebrate me, which felt infinitely better than being surrounded by people who attended out of obligation. During the evening, several guests gave brief speeches about our relationships and what my friendship or mentorship had meant to them. Hearing these words from people who truly knew and valued me was more meaningful than any forced celebration my family might have provided. One colleague spoke about how my research had influenced her own work with families affected by favoritism. A former client shared how our therapy sessions had helped her recognize her own worth and establish healthy boundaries with family members who had consistently devalued her contributions. A close friend talked about how my resilience and determination had inspired her during her own difficult family transitions. These speeches reminded me that my experiences, painful as they had been, had contributed to my ability to help other people navigate similar challenges. The emotional neglect that had nearly destroyed my self-worth had ultimately become the foundation for work that was making a real difference in other people's lives. As the evening continued, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 10 years earlier, I had been a devastated 18-year-old whose family had forgotten her birthday entirely. Now, I was a successful professional, surrounded by people who valued me enough to take time from their own busy lives to celebrate my achievements and express gratitude for my presence in their lives. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been easy. It had required years of therapy, boundary setting, and the gradual development of relationships based on mutual respect rather than familial obligation. It had meant accepting that my family of origin was not capable of providing the love and support I needed and deserved, but it had also meant discovering that chosen family relationships could provide validation, celebration, and support that exceeded anything I had imagined possible during my childhood. It had meant learning that my worth was not determined by my family's treatment of me, but by my own actions, achievements, and the positive impact I had on other people's lives. The celebration ended with a toast to second chances, chosen families, and the possibility of healing even from deep emotional wounds. As I looked around the room at the faces of people who genuinely cared about my well-being and success, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. My forgotten 18th birthday had been devastating at the time, but it had also been the catalyst for everything good that had followed. It had forced me to recognize patterns of favoritism I had been trained to ignore. It had motivated me to seek therapy and develop healthy boundaries. It had inspired my academic focus and eventual career path. Most importantly, it had led me to understand that I deserved better treatment and had the power to create that better treatment for myself. If you're watching this video because you've experienced similar family dynamics, I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not imagining things. Parental favoritism is real, it's harmful, and it's not your fault. You deserve to be celebrated, valued, and appreciated for who you are rather than tolerated for what you can do for other people. Your worth is not determined by how your family treats you. Your achievements matter even if they're not acknowledged by the people whose acknowledgement you most crave. Your feelings about differential treatment are valid even if other people minimize or dismiss them. Healing from family favoritism is possible, but it often requires building new support systems rather than trying to change people who are committed to maintaining dysfunctional patterns. It means learning to validate yourself rather than seeking validation from people who have consistently refused to provide it. Most importantly, it means understanding that you have the power to create the loving, supportive relationships you deserve, even if those relationships look different from what you originally hoped for. Sometimes the family you choose is far more loving than the family you were born into. Have you experienced similar patterns of favoritism in your own family? How did you recognize the differential treatment, and what steps did you take to protect your emotional well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps us understand that we're not alone in what we've endured. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to support more content about healing from family dysfunction and building healthier relationships. Your engagement helps these stories reach other people who might need to hear that their experiences are valid and that healing is possible. Remember that you are worthy of love, celebration, and genuine support, regardless of how your family of origin has treated you. Your worth is inherent, not earned, and you deserve relationships that reflect that truth.